Good afternoon. I'm Jennifer Roberts, Director of Pathopositive Communities for ecoAmerica. My program works with local communities around the country to build leadership for public support and political resolve for climate solutions. I join you from Charlotte, North Carolina, the ancestral lands of the Catawba and Sugaree nations. I honor those of these First Nations who still reside here today and contribute to our community with their talents and skills, even in the face of continued oppression and colonialism. Today, I have the honor of speaking with Clarence Anthony, the CEO and Executive Director of the National League of Cities, which we affectionately call NLC, the largest and oldest organization that represents America's cities and their leaders. Under his leadership, NLC has advanced policies to expand local control and provide direct funding for local programs that range from public safety and infrastructure to transportation and sustainability. And the fun thing is that Mr. Anthony began his career in public service as a mayor in South Bay, Florida for 24 years. Clarence, it is so good to be with you again. I so much enjoyed it when NLC had their annual meeting here in Charlotte when I was still mayor. It was such a pleasure to work with you and your staff, and I'm so grateful for all that the NLC does to help America's cities. So I have lots of great questions for you.
First of all, let me just say thank you, Mayor, for having me here today, and appreciate the opportunity to share the perspective from every city, town, and village. We miss you as mayor, but you're doing an amazing job spreading the word with local government officials about the importance of climate. So if I slip and say, hey, Mayor, every once in a while, just excuse me, Jennifer, because I'm just still a pal of yours. So.
Well, then we're mutual fans because you have an awesome responsibility. And I remember depending on NLC for quite a bit of information. So it's fabulous. Wonderful. You know, we have seen a big shift in national priorities around climate change at the federal level with the Biden administration and all of their priorities. And there's a recognition at the local level that there are big needs. So what everyone wants to hear is, what are America's cities saying to the federal government right now about their priorities and their needs around climate solutions and infrastructure?
Well, first of all, let me say we are so excited that the Biden administration recognizes the importance of local leadership and the commitment that city leaders have had to climate and sustainability, and the importance it is to not just our local leaders, but our citizens. And we're encouraged by the federal action thus far, from reimagining or re-engaging in the Paris Climate Agreement, the early executive order addressing the climate crisis, and the president's American Jobs Plan, which centers climate right in the middle throughout the economy and the federal government. So local leaders in 2019 helped us to, really identify 5 priorities NLC committed to around building sustainable and resilient infrastructure, which focuses on so many areas, including emissions reduction, supporting local vulnerable assessments and adaptation implementation efforts, and as well as trying to get more federal programs that will help communities reduce risk from disasters and natural hazards. So local leaders are committed to working and leading on the issues. For the past 4 years, NLC has sponsored the largest delegation of local elected officials to the COP21 in Paris in 2015. So there's so much more we can do, and it makes a difference in terms of the federal partner that you have. So we're looking forward to continuing to work with the federal government to create a really, I'd say, a holistic federal approach to consider as we deal with the issues of climate and risk and vulnerabilities, and making sure federal policy recognizes that.
You know, Clarence, one of the amazing things that our cities do is they handle so many issues all at the same time. And one of the things that we heard yesterday in our Climate and Health Forum is the impact of COVID-19 and the pandemic and stretching resources. But I know from my work that our cities and our localities have continued to move forward on climate solutions. It's amazing they're able to juggle all these balls at once. I know, for example, our work in Utah, we had a climate and clean air compact passed, during the pandemic that had bipartisan support for the whole state of Utah, and so many municipalities there took part in that. So what I'd love to hear from you is how are America's cities balancing those, the pandemic needs and the climate needs, and how are they continuing to move forward on everything?
2020, even after, as I say the word 2020, I exhale and just breathe because it has been tough. There's no question that a lot of cities were hurt. And that hurt everyone because cities had to figure out whether we lay people off or we respond to this issue. And when the pandemic hit, communities struggled to maintain basic services. In some cases, again, furloughing employees and not being able to continue construction and maintenance projects. And at the same time, they faced a record number of climate-related disasters. The wildfires, the extreme heat and hurricanes from my state of Florida, which further increased the pressure on local governments and residents and businesses. So I think the impact of climate and extreme weather events posed especially a pressing threat to persons with disabilities and economically disadvantaged households, the elderly, and other vulnerable populations. But I think cities knew that while also dealing with that issue, those issues, they also had to deal with recovery, economic recovery, extreme weather events recovery. And they had to prioritize. And then within prioritizing, they also prioritized equity and making sure that the least of those that had not been recognized, that these kinds of occurrences have major impact on BIPOC communities and other communities. And one of the things that the pandemic really did, it really highlighted the inequities, the gaps that existed in our communities, in our nation for years. And so as city leaders approached the issues of pandemic, the economy, the recession, I will tell you, thank God that we were able to get some good news in getting a rescue package passed so that every city, town, and village in America will be able to get monies in their budget that hopefully they won't forget those gaps. We hope that they will also use these funds to patch some of the losses that they've had. But secondly, I hope that they'll show how important it is to have transportation options, green space, open streets, access to childcare, and so many other areas. And it showed us quickly, and I think this is the important part, how important it was to have a federal partner. And again, as you think about recovering and rebounding, how do we make sure that those important issues to people who've been left behind are recognized? So as we recover and build back, I think there's more enthusiasm and more commitment for climate action. And I think we're off to a good start, but we must keep pushing. And those cities, towns, and villages that you all live in, that's part of this session today, it's important that you push for a sustainability office, that you talk about how we reverse the decisions that have hurt communities that have not been at the table in the past on these important water, wastewater issues, sustainability issues, environmental issues, because our communities need to be engaged.
Clarence, you have absolutely hit such an important topic, and that is that the issue of justice and equity. And one of the things that we've seen with the pandemic and the climate crisis is that people are starting to connect the dots and to understand when we have folks who have been underserved and disinvested and have not had access to healthcare, that they are more vulnerable to everything from pandemics to climate change to job loss. And we need to represent and to support those fragile communities. And you talked about BIPOC communities, Black, Indigenous, people of color. We're trying, city leaders around the country, to bring those voices forward. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about, places you've seen and cities you've seen that have worked to really bring those voices to the table in creative ways and to broaden that engagement, because there's so much richness there and so much support for climate solutions.
Yeah, that's been an important part of my work, really all my life, my professional life, because I grew up in a rural community where the water quality was horrible. The air quality from the burning of the sugarcane was really bad, and the access to healthcare. Our hospital was 30 minutes away, and so I have lived experience about the importance of creating resilient communities and creating sustainability and climate and quality of life. And what we're seeing is that local leaders, again, are working across the sectors that are in their communities, making sure that they're at the table to have input. And I got to tell you, I say have input. Most folks say and have decision-making authority. But as a former mayor, we want your input. And I hope that local leaders will indeed take heed to that input so that local leaders can make the right decision about those important issues regarding access to care. More importantly, I'll tell you this. This is what's sort of bothering me and keeping me up at night. I mean, the vaccine distribution and the vaccine access is another example of how our communities and the intersectionality of access, recovery, and inclusion is sometimes lost. And we got to do better. We got to make sure that as we look at all the issues related to climate justice, resilience, sustainability, that I too am impacted as a Black person. My community is impacted as a Hispanic individual or any other culture. And a lot of times I don't think that has been one of the ways that we've looked at climate, that it really does impact every part of the community. So I'm excited to see where the Biden administration and others are putting the issues of equity right in front of everything we do. And it must be in every impact that we create, the climate impacts, every type of impact must have that as an important element, because these extreme weather events most often challenge the Black, Latinx, and Indigenous community more so than any. They're harder, those populations is harder to recover. So we need their voice. And I'm advocating strongly for that because of my lived experience.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that word decision making, because it's one thing to invite folks to come listen. It's another thing to ask for their input and then to help to include their ideas in the decision making, to have not just an advisory role, but a true policy role. And that's, I know a lot of cities struggle with that because democracy is messy. When you get a lot of different voices, it's hard to come to consensus. But I have seen it be very powerful at the local level.
And you and I could have a long discussion about that, because it is a challenge, because we go back to the days when we were elected. We said, they elected me to make that decision. I often said they elected me to represent you. and to hear your voice and to be a part of the decision-making process. But ultimately, as a former mayor, it ends up at your desk.
That's right. As I say, when something goes wrong, you get all the blame. When something goes right, everybody else takes the credit.
That's right.
That's okay. That's what we sign up for. I would love to. You mentioned something about cities should really try to get sustainability directors. And I know that the National League of Cities works with a lot of smaller cities that may not have that in their budget, but I know that there have been creative ways that you work with cities to help them with resources. So I'd love to hear from all the folks that are on listening today who might be from a smaller or a middle-sized city. I'd love to hear some of the ways that NLC helps those cities.
Yeah, I do think that those cities that can, in fact, afford to hire a sustainability director, it's a good idea. But we do recognize of our 2,500 members, of the 19,000, 18,000 are under 50,000 residents. And I think we got to really go beyond hiring sustainability directors. And I think there's some opportunity with the Rescue Act and the dollars coming to do some regional planning. When I was, again, mayor, South Florida Compact was something that we did as a 3-county effort and strategy. And we got to also look at maybe identifying some of our planning professionals to be that as a part of their job responsibility so that they can feel as a part of this change as well. But the bottom line, I think that every part of our planning process, whether it's our regional transportation decisions, our building codes, our electric utility, everything needs to be grounded in sustainability and long-term impact on communities. And our leadership in community resilience program is really designed with small and medium-sized cities in mind. This program makes it easy for cities to apply because they don't all have to have professional grant writers either. We provide small $10,000 grants to support public engagement or climate action events. And we work with the community to offer education, training, connectivity opportunities. So we're hoping that we can grow that because we recognize that cities that are small really oftentimes they don't have the infrastructure to do it. But these grants, we provided $400,000 in direct grants. And we want to make sure we leverage those grants as well. So I think there's some great opportunities to engage a little bit more with our small and medium-sized cities. But we can't expect every city to be able to, like this great city of Charlotte, to be able to afford the professional sustainability officer. But that does not mean that we can't do those things because of a position. It's the commitment that is important.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we've seen at ecoAmerica working with cities is that many times even department directors within the city don't always recognize their connection to climate change. The people in charge of the water and sewer system, they don't realize the reason they're seeing more severe flooding and more severe rainstorms that's overwhelming their systems is because of climate change. And so they have an important role. And that's one of the things that our Climate Ambassador program helps people to connect those dots and to everybody to see that they have a role in helping with climate solutions. And that's what's so great about, your sustainability part for the National League of Cities and the Resilient Cities is that you're helping engage the leadership to really understand that as well. And so I hope that those folks who are listening who do have it in their budget can push for a sustainability director. Advocacy is so important. Citizen engagement is so important. and, thinking about that citizen engagement. There are probably a lot of folks listening. We do cross-sector work at ecoAmerica with the faith community and the health community. And so there may be a lot of folks listening who may have never spoken to a city council meeting. And these folks would love to hear, if they're in that middle-sized city or small town, or even a large city, what's the best way for them to talk to city leaders to help them make progress and to support their elected officials on climate solutions that are equitable and inclusive?
Well, I think the first thing is that, as you know, Jennifer, mayors, council members are human, just like you. And I do believe that they are committed to serving the community, and they want to learn. And they have a lot of issues in front of them, especially right now during this pandemic recovery time, because they're dealing with police community issues, race issues, sustainability issues, housing, unemployment. And I would say they're dealing with their own self-health because this has been a stressful time. I just think that first we need to be educated on what resources our cities, towns, and villages have. What resources do your community have? And talk about how through the planning process, whether it's transportation, water, wastewater issues, all those sustainability issues, how that city leader can match their commitment by matching it with their budget. You finance what you're committed to. And so I encourage, especially, those that are in the BIPOC community, the Black community as well, specifically, learn a lot more about the issues and the impact of the climate on your life. And then again, go in and speak to your elected officials. I believe they want to hear, and this is the time to do it. I think there's been some positive opportunities created through this virtual connection, the FaceTime opportunities to be able to engage in the public sector process. And so I just hope that we will reach out, put new faces around the table. Because I can tell you, back in my day of being in South Florida, working in the water quality area on my graduate degree at Florida Atlantic University, I was the only Black person invited around the table, talking about sustainability, talking about water quality issues. And it's time out for that. It's time that all of us stretch our comfort arms and reach out in every part of the community and say, how healthy is your family? Do you see more asthma attacks in your family? Can we not move that street and split up the community? Why do we have to cite that facility here? There's so many social justice issues that we can fight as partners. And I, again, am very committed to that because I've seen it happen and don't want to see it continue in our country.
Clarence, that is so true. And I just think about, there was recently a survey done by EDF that showed that 2/3 of white people do not know what environmental racism is, and they do not understand climate justice. No one has connected the dots for them. And so it is incredibly important in this time for the BIPOC community to speak up, to know they have a seat at the table, that we need to hear those stories so that we can create a better future and a just environment for every community, for everybody in our communities. We have to hear the stories. Storytelling is so important. So I join you in encouraging and lifting up those voices. And we only have about 45 seconds left, but I wanted to make sure before we end that I just thank you for your leadership. I thank you for the vision you have for our cities to be just, inclusive, equitable, and to offer prosperity to all, because you have lived it in your past and in your current leadership role, and everyone at NLC is such a great representation. So I just want to say thank you so much.
Well, thank you, and appreciate being here at the American Climate Leadership Summit. And let me tell you this is the final thing I want to say. This is our opportunity, everybody. We have an administration that is committed to sustainability and equity. We cannot let this opportunity pass us by. Cooper Martin on my team, I go and I call him and get on virtual and say, hey, this is our opportunity. You, as a professional, this is yours as well. So I am ambitious about it. I'm committed, and this is our time. Let's not let this time go by without having a major impact. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you so much. Hope to see you again soon.
All right. Thank you.